Picture this: you're a self proclaimed urban girl. You have spent your life in ICSE schools reading Shakespeare. You have worked the high pressure corridors of Deloitte, and your world is defined by structure and logic. And then you step into a village in Rajasthan for the first time. You aren't greeted by a boardroom, you are greeted by the sight of people drinking water that looks like white foam straight from a sewage canal. Most people would walk away. Today's guest, look closer. Divya Yechamedi is the CEO of Nandi Community Water Services. She is also an unintentional rebel, coming from a traditional background where the women before her weren't even allowed to finish school. Divya didn't just break the mold, she shattered it. She is the only woman leading an organization in India's male dominated water sector, navigating everything from complex engineering to village sarpanches carrying AK 47s. From the structured halls of Deloitte to solving one of India's most critical crises, her journey is a masterclass in resilience, courage, and purpose driven leadership. Divya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Vijayashree. I'm so happy to be here.
I was just reviewing the notes of our conversation and I'm like still in awe with the fact that you traveled through the night to witness a Sarpanch walking with AK 47 and then many other villages in the dark, in the night. And I was like, that is really courageous thing to do. And here we are trying to, yes, build a place for women as strong and bold and courageous. I agree. But still, there is a tad bit of concern when you travel during the dark and then alone to see a Sarpanch walking with an AK 47. I'm like, kudos to you. How did you get that courage coming from an urban culture?
Early on in my career, right? So for a very long time, I've wanted to work in the social sector. So I had decided I'll do whatever is required to get my place in this sector. So early on in my career, as I was exploring, because I'm completely from the urban
Yeah.
background, as I was exploring, Bharat versus India, I was very curious, right? I wanted to learn everything there is to learn about, the villages. I also was full of conviction, right? Like that, this is where I want to be and this is where I want to grow, right? So it was this combination of curiosity and conviction that made me want to do anything that is required to earn my place over here. And a part of that was I will I will do everything that needs to be done, and I don't want to get any special treatment because I'm a woman.
I'm curious, what made you feel that it should not be that I'm a woman?
Because for me it was I need to earn my place from here. I'm not from here. I don't come from this background and I need to earn my place, and I'm not giving anybody any excuse to say, okay, this one is going to be a burden. So therefore I did a lot of these things. And later, right, a couple of years later, when I was sharing some of these incidents, right, either the Punjab incident or where I'm traveling through the night in really pitch dark places and genuinely scared, or going to villages where there are people with guns.
AK-47s.
Yes. In when I was sharing some of these incidents with a larger audience, I think there was this look of disbelief, right? Like, what the hell? You know, women or girls from good families don't put themselves in these situations, right? And I think for a while in between, I felt a lot of shame for doing these things, right? And I've had a lot of many incidents that were really unsafe. So I felt genuinely a lot of shame. And then when I took a step back, when I was thinking about it, that's not how I think right now, right? Because I am a leader. And And I don't mean to say that, somehow everybody should take this risk, or I don't want to make this risk romantic. It's not romantic, right? Safety is of utmost importance, and it needs all safety protocols we need to take care of, right? Woman doing her work in difficult terrains is not her problem. It is the fact that that work in that terrain is unsafe for her. That is the problem. So the shame is not hers. The shame is not mine. It is society's at large,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
But then, how we are conditioned is that, a bit of it will raise its head every once in a while. But yeah, so that's been the evolution of my thinking. It's less dominant now, but when I am sharing stories about that time, it rears its.
No, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that.
Yeah.
It's so nice to see that shift,
Yeah.
in the thought
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Divya, you said that you were raised in the city, an urban girl reading Shakespeare and, not just passed by villages, but never experienced village on its whole. And then from Deloitte, you choose to quit and, get into the villages. And you now mentioned that Bharat versus India. That was so beautiful. So how was that experience?
There was a huge shift, right? In some ways, I can say was a culture shock,
Mm.
right? So I am an urban girl, but I am an urban girl very rooted in India from a fairly conservative family. So it's not like I'm unaware of, what goes on. Um, but it was in many, many ways a culture shock. In We also a lot of times have a romantic idea about what a village is. Just clean water, air without pollution, lots of greenery, peace and simplicity and simple life and all of that. Um, Actually, I mean, there are parts of that, right? But a village is a microcosm of the country, of society at large, right? So it has those, but it also has all the complications that an urban space has, or that our country at large has. So I think that understanding um, was took me a little bit of time. That understanding and that acceptance, I think, took me a little bit of time. And Yeah, and then I became more practical. And yeah, I started to sort of understand it in its own merits, in its own beauty, and its own complexities and nuances.
What was that culture shock about?
This just lack of simplicity, right? For example, I had never imagined that I would go to a village. I mean, in 2010, I started in 2010, but forget 2010. Even today, you will see women completely covered in a parda in the north. In Rajasthan, you will not be able to see their face at all. Okay. Some of those were, extremely, it took me a while to accept that, right? Because I genuinely, you'll think, because of the pace at which certain metros grow, we sometimes become we disconnected from really rural India, which is 70% of your
Yeah,
country, which is
exactly.
70% of your population. But even today, these women don't show their faces to anybody. Things that are accepted in certain cultures and how a woman is treated. A lot of those were very initially difficult to understand or accept. But there were also some, pleasant surprises. For example, in tribal communities. Okay, and this is something that gives me genuinely so much joy. Okay, so they ve- they are very easy in their relationships.
Mm.
Okay, so if a husband and wife split, they're not going to, drag it out in court for like some 15 years fighting over property and making it ugly and messy. supremely easy. They know, they're like, we'll fall in love. And I get it that we fall out of love. And so if the woman falls in love with, say, another guy, that guy actually comes to the husband's house. He gives him a goat, and the husband serves him a lunch,
Okay.
and that's it, a meal. And that's how it's broken. I mean, I may have forgotten some parts of the custom, but it's as
No,
simple
that
as
is
that.
super simple.
It's as simple as that. And then, they move on,
Oh.
right? And a lot of tribal communities are very matrilinear. And every 20 kilometers to 200 kilometers, there's a different culture, a different way of being, a different weave, a different kind of food. All of it was fascinating, as well as like, this was culture shock for me, that it is so simple.
I
You
know.
just, like, whatever, give a goat
Give
and
a
you're
goat and they have a lunch and
exactly,
move
and,
on.
and then you move on,
Yeah.
that kind of. So they're very easy in their relationships. They are
Maybe more
polyamorous.
practical.
Yes, and they're practical, and they have a way of being which is extremely easy, which even shows up in their dance. That ease in the body, it really shows up in their dances. So some of these, yeah, were all extremely new to me,
Mm.
but also very interesting.
And those dance and all that would be the beautiful part of the culture,
Yes,
right?
absolutely, absolutely.
What challenges did you have to face or barriers that you needed to break to move from Deloitte and come into this venture of yours? Because you said you are the first person in your, at least in the Indian household, to come step out and do something bold like this. So, how was that journey?
Deloitte, fully structured, right? Everything is structured, and I was an entry level person, so it was repetitive, it was routine, and it was completely structured, and that was very difficult for me to deal with. I mean, it was like beyond the point I was bored out of my mind. So I really needed to therefore shift.
Okay.
Got into the manufacturing unit, where there were many, many, many opportunities to learn, right? Which is because it's much easier to move across different departments, learn how every department is working, and things like that, right? So therefore, it was very engaging, and I learned a lot. And I also understood what my strengths are. Like, I can create systems. I'm terrible at following them. It's so I need that partnership where I can create something, and I'll need help in someone that's much more focused and is able to really ensure that the system is upheld. So those are things I learned there. I also learned much more about Indian society in a way that was very difficult for me to learn in Deloitte or college, school, or any of that before, which is how patriarchy works. The expectations of subtle ways in which how women are expected to be. All the secretarial work I had to do. They was terrible at it. I've always been terrible at it. But I didn't question it because I was conditioned by it. And it was just like de facto, okay, whatever secretarial work,
Yeah. Okay.
you do it.
I'll do it.
I'll do it, you do it, whatever.
Wow.
Or someone's coming, a client is coming from, say, some other country. I have to make sure the lunch is arranged, or there has to be a certain way in which I present my ideas. I've got to be subservient. Some of those things are things I became much more aware of in an Indian setting. And so that was one transition. And then the next transition was to be able to really go much deeper into rural India and really see um, how work happens, what a woman's role is, and how you've got to be, and things like that. So there are so many sort of transitions,
No,
but
as we talk, it just strikes me that even in villages, I'm sure we also spoke about it, that there is a deity Yellamma the woman goddess who is very powerful and represents women empowerment in its true sense. And we are talking about this separation is so smooth and very practical. I have a feeling that you go more tribal, women seem to be much more empowered and better off there. And somewhere, as we build the society, we have made it very difficult for women.
They are. Tribal societies are, yeah, they're more empowered. In what I've seen, I can't say for all tribal societies, but a lot of them are matrilineal. They're very strong women. Most of the work is done by women. They have a stronger voice. And I think sometimes with outside influences, there's confusion that is caused, but they live sustainably. They are protectors of the ecosystem that they are in. Yeah, and at the same time, they have very high mortality rates.
Yes.
At the time of giving, but why can't I remember that word? What mortality is that? When a woman is infant
Infant
mortality,
mortality rate.
right? The mother also dies. Health issues are rampant. So, alcohol abuse is quite a bit. It's,
Yeah.
nothing is just simple,
I
but at
think
the
those
same time,
happened as the society evolved and moved,
yeah,
thought
the
we are
health
going
issues
progressive.
have always
Yeah.
been there
Yeah.
because of lack of access per se. I think the larger point I'm trying to make is that there are many things that we can learn from them, and there are many things that they can benefit from how societies move forward as well. I think I don't think there's any single way of being that's like perfect. It's all imperfect.
So, coming back to the barriers you had to break to come into this, did you face any challenges with your family?
So I come from a fairly conservative family, a fairly feudalistic community. Agency of women was actively discouraged. But this is for the region, for the community, and independence was genuinely looked at as a threat to household harmony and peace. I mean, all through my life, while growing up, I have heard of, if women also start earning, how will marriages work? I mean, they're not going to work. And in so many words, right? And I remember also thinking at that time that this is um, unfair, but also not like what garbage are you talking? I mean, it is what you grew up with, right? So my previous generation was not encouraged to study. And so mine is the first generation to study, right? So all of these transitions, leaving Deloitte itself was like, what the hell are you doing? Because finally, somebody is. So if you're working, then you work in a multinational so that, there is some name and fame and, that kind of a thing. So from there itself, what are you doing? And I think to work in the social sector was okay. I mean, it was you're doing something good, so that's fine. But for most part of everything that I did in the initial years, I wasn't sharing at home because I didn't think, or I was already having many fights across many fronts, and I didn't want to add to that, right? The situations I was putting myself in was not stuff I shared. The work that I was doing was stuff that, they felt was meaningful, and therefore there was sort of support for that.
Do you still see that happening in your team, your people who work with you, and in your community?
The challenges that women face sort of continues, right? In the sense that if they have to, they can work only after their child is taken care of. They can work only if their child is doing well at school. they can work if there is nobody to take care of at home, like a parent or a or the in-laws. There's
And
no
we're talking about
caregiving.
urban communities.
This is urban, right? And these are subtle things. I remember somebody from my family saying, you can study, but why do you need to work? You can study so that you can take better care of your family. But why do you need to work, right? And honestly, the fact that I'm working, the fact that I'm leading an organization is of course a professional achievement, but it is also a toast to all those women that really pushed boundaries so that and men as well, because my father was really supportive, that pushed the boundaries so that I continue to work despite fights and all of that. It is those women that really were pushed boundaries and fought so many times so that we could work. But it continues. It continues. It is really difficult. I think workspaces have been designed keeping men with a strong support structure in mind, right? So he can work till 7, 8 in the night.
Yeah.
And when he goes back, dinner is ready, everything is taken care of. But a woman very often can't do that, right? She doesn't necessarily have that kind of a support structure. So there's quite a bit of judgment, there's quite a bit of juggling, and they continue to struggle.
Of late, in many conversations with women, I hear that when a woman is earning, it's okay, you can earn. But if the income goes beyond a male's income or it becomes significant, then there is a pushback from the family.
Yeah.
Have you
Oh, yeah, yeah,
heard
yeah.
about it or seen or faced it
Yes,
with your
many times, many times. And I think it is patriarchy is this entire structure, right? Where uh, the guy has to earn more than the woman,
Hmm.
right? But it's how everybody's shaped. The guy won't be allowed to live if he earns less than the woman. He himself will be constantly, unless he's really evolved, and he needs to work on himself. To be very honest, I think a man always needs to work on himself. But he needs to be on this white horse forever galloping. He can't stop. He cannot earn less than a woman, and how dare you? And it's a lot of pressure, right? So he won't be allowed to live with it. She will forever be facing the backlash of it. Like, because you're doing this, the kid is not studying well. Because you're forever focused on work. Look at your mother-in-law's health. Look how much she's having to work. And it's a constant thing. It's constant. Sometimes overtly, but sometimes in subtle ways, and they're just then conditioned to start to pull back, because what's more important than family?
Hmm.
So I see this very, very, very often.
How is it in villages? Villages, especially you are working in the space of water, and typically, water is. If I think of a village and water, I remember this image of women carrying water, and you know, is there an equal opportunity for women at the sarpanch level, or is it still male dominated?
No, it's fully male dominated. There is reservation for women to become sarpanches. So they will make the women contest, but actually who's running it is either the husband or the brother-in-law, the father-in-law, the son. So really strong women leaders are few and far apart,
Okay.
but they at least have representation. I'm hoping that in a few years, that'll start to sort of
Shift.
shift. Yeah.
And with many women, not just you, Divya, we are always in conversation with women in the NGO space, working with slums, rural, and lower income groups. And has there been have you witnessed any shift? in your experience or in your field of work? Has there been a story that you can say, share?
There's this the story of one of the people that works with us actually. So the way we work is we go to places with highly contaminated water. We set up a water purification unit, purify that water, and we provide it to communities at a nominal charge. So from every village, there is one person that has to run the water center. So there is this one person from Nalgonda, which is a district in Telangana, one particular village. She was the person that was running the water center. She ran the water center. I mean, she joined us immediately after, I think, school, after class 10 or class 12, I can't remember. But she joined us, she started working with us, and she worked with us in that village for 9 years. She undergoes quite a bit of training as a part of it. How do you run the water center? How do you keep books? How do you do community awareness programs, about why you need to take water? Even sell, right? You have to sell a certain card so that people come and take water. So there's a lot of negotiation, handling people's complaints. Caste issues need to be handled because they'll say, he touched that tap, and so I won't take water from there. And all of these difficult things she needs to sort of deal with and handle. And so she learned through that for 9 years. And then she started to take care of a cluster of villages. And now recently she actually contested to become a sarpanch and she even won.
Wow.
Because what happens through this process is everybody knows them in the village. She starts to become more confident as she knows how to deal with some of these really tough discussions, right? Because it's a constant negotiation and discussion that she has to have in the village. And she's also looked at as someone to be respected because she is doing awareness program. She is talking about things that a lot of them don't know about, what waterborne diseases, what causes them, how do you deal with them, and things like that, and several other things, right? So I think through that process, she's managed to, build confidence in the village. And she's now in the recent election, she's now the sarpanch.
Divya, I was researching about or whatever I could to understand about what's happening in the water sector, and you being in that space, I wanted to understand it more. And I did not find many women, or rather, I didn't see any women there except your name popping up. How does it feel to be the one to stand out in this sector and bringing that change?
Yeah, so I think there are very few women leaders in the sector. It is a little bit surprising given that drinking water specifically is in most villages, most urban areas as well, is a woman's duty, right? To fetch water is a woman's duty. But when that water is not available, um, very rarely is a woman's perspective sought in how it can be solved. Um, it's only when you ask that question I'm thinking about it, because why else would you not have too many women in the sector? So, what do I bring? I think most people, water at large, right, is thought of as an infrastructure issue. When you don't have water or the quality of water is not good, when there is insufficient or there is not good enough water, it's thought of as an infrastructure issue. So what do people do? What do governments do? What do organizations do? They'll actually manufacture the machines that are required for for purifying the water, or they will spend on infrastructure to make water available. And this has been happening, for example, from the government's perspective. Every year, thousands of crores of rupees is spent and constantly on building the infrastructure.
Hmm.
Okay. And similarly, a lot of organizations focus on the technology bit of it. How do you make machines that will purify the water or that will be connecting, water to the last mile. Uh, but the drinking water problem in India is a problem of operations and quality. It's not a problem of infrastructure. It is, I mean, like I'm saying, thousands of crores is spent on infrastructure, but very insignificant amount on how that infrastructure will be maintained. How will you ensure that even if it is maintained, the quality of water that is flowing through that infrastructure is the right quality of water and is safe for drinking? And that it is a finite resource that you need to contribute towards, that you need to pay for,
Yeah.
right? Very limited amount of money is spent on that, very limited amount of thought is put into that. And except for isolated incidents, there's very limited success in this area, which is why you'll keep spending on the capex or on the infrastructure and still nothing works. People still don't have sufficient water. By one estimate, it's 2 to 3 people out of every 5 people don't have water that is drinkable, right? So I think this is where we come in, and this is where I think um, being a woman, I bring in a certain perspective, which is to go to an area that is not as glamorous, that is not solely dependent on fixing an infrastructure issue, which is much more glamorous, which is much more considered to solve problems. But I focus on ensuring that not only do you get the infrastructure, but that infrastructure needs to be properly maintained, operated, and the quality that you are giving is the right quality and people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, for example, across India, just 27% people pay for their water. Okay, so the remaining is the burden of the government. And obviously, they are not able to allocate sufficient money. So then they're not able to get the water, or the water that they're getting is terrible. You would have heard of the Indore incident where 23 people died. And it's like classic, right? It's the classic problem, or that is a microcosm of what is happening in India at large. So, yeah, by focusing on the part that actually nobody else is focusing on, we are able to make a difference, because everybody that is a Nandi water, that is drinking Nandi water is paying for that water, getting the right quality of water. And, there are, I'll just give you an example, Shri. Amongst the first villages that I went to was in 2012. This is in this district called Nalgonda district, where there's very high contamination of fluoride in drinking water. So when I went in, there was so many people with skeletal fluorosis. So their bones are completely deformed. They can't do like your basic day-to-day work.
Oh.
So in partnership with Rural Electrification Corporation, we set up water centers there. And now for 13 years, we are running that water center and providing water to people, and at very nominal charges. So we have to keep it affordable to the poorest of poor. So it's been running now for 13 years, and we had taken another client to that place, just to say that these run for the long term. The sarpanch had come with all ward members to share with the client that since we have come, an entire generation of people don't have fluorosis
Beautiful.
or skeletal
Wow.
fluorosis. There's an entire generation in that village that's not suffering with it. Okay, so this is, and we were able to make this impact because we focused, yes, on getting the right technology, but more than that, to ensure that it is running 24 by 7. It is running and giving the right quality of water. We're building awareness on what happens when you don't drink the right water. And we're bringing in that behavior change where people are paying for the water so that the water center continues to run. So it's that entire system that needs to work. And really, I somehow feel like that's a perspective that perhaps I'm able to bring somehow, which is, I can't fully articulate it, but somehow I think just being a woman helps me bring that perspective. And I think that's my contribution to
That is so
them.
beautiful.
I think, I don't know, but yeah.
And to walk into a village who has been getting water and it's a free resource and never been seen as a resource that they need to pay for, you coming and saying that, so what, just you need to pay for it. Maybe it's coming from your experience in the rural and the urban background. Um, did that ignorance or that innocence help in
Yeah.
establishing that
Yeah.
concept?
No,
Pay for your
absolutely.
water?
Absolutely. So um, sometimes I think it is ignorance, and sometimes I think it is freedom from, these inherent or inherited assumptions that come from being from the sector
Yeah.
or having seen it over a period of time, right? So absolutely, I think I was able to just ask without any inhibitions, or
Okay.
as in, this was something that was established even before I had come. But despite political pressure, every time there are elections, somebody will come and say, no, you have to reduce the price, because we do work in partnership with the governments. Or they'll say, how dare you make it from 2 rupees for 20 liters to 3 rupees for 20 liters? Or, because they'll make an election promise saying, we are going to make sure that this water is going to be free. So to fight against all of that and to continue to say we won't be able to, it is a factor of financial sustainability. It's not so much, I mean, you cannot run the water center if there is nobody to pay for it. And communities understand that, right? But I think it would have been really difficult for me to withstand some of those pressures in the early days if I didn't go with this conviction of, what do you mean you won't pay? I mean, how does it work otherwise? And sometimes that could be difficult if I come from a more traditional water space where, nobody pays for water. I didn't necessarily have that knowledge.
Mhm.
So,
And
and I
it
think
helped.
in, yes, and I think in many ways, I'm a generalist and I've worked in various functions without, much expertise in these functions, whether it is HR or fundraising or partnerships or IT. I had, most often no experience in any of these functions before. But I was able to bring in a certain perspective only because I didn't come with inherent assumptions. So while yes, sometimes being a generalist has its disadvantages. For me, it really had many
Played to your
advantages.
advantage.
Yes.
Hearing your story, I'm sure you're seen as somebody, in a elevated state because you are in the space of social work, social cause, an NGO bringing a lot of benefit to the village, women, uh, transforming lives from saying traditional illnesses have been recovered and they are not seeing it in the next generation. So, somewhere you're put on a pedestal, right? When you're in the social workspace. And that sort of puts you in an elevated space. How do you how do you stay grounded when you are put in that?
I do think that um, social sector leaders are put on a pedestal, but um, I don't think that's good. And why do I feel like it's not good? When you put someone on a pedestal, it dehumanizes them. It takes away their their freedom to be human,
Mm.
right? It really dehumanizes them. Now you cannot make any mistakes. You can't do any wrong.
Mm.
You have to. The society's integrity is on your shoulders, but we are navigating difficult waters. I mean, pun intended, on an everyday basis, daily, on a daily basis. Every day, we have to make judgment calls. And in a very imperfect society, right? And of course, we're going to make mistakes. So when someone is put on a pedestal, then they can't make mistakes. They can't be human. And how do you survive that? I mean, of course we make mistakes. It is an imperfect society. And a social leader does have a higher responsibility um, to work with integrity and to be ethical. But it's not only that person's responsibility. It's not only a social leader's responsibility, right? Because as in society at large is made up of individuals, and I think it's everyone's responsibility to work with integrity, right?
Yeah.
So when we don't do that and we put the entire burden on one person, elevate that person, then you're dehumanizing them, and that person is most definitely going to crash.
Yes.
That's just setting ourselves up for failure. So I don't think any social leader should be put on a pedestal at all.
And I had a conversation with one more social leader, and she said, "Shri, it's so nice to hear that you say we are on a pedestal, but half the time we are always begging for money."
Yes. That's another one, huh? I am the forever begging for money.
So I
All
don't
the
know what
time.
pedestal I am in.
All the time. And not just that, Shri. Like, we are the most regulated sector in the country. We are the sector that is looked at with most suspicion. So it's like, because there is a bad reputation. Do we deserve it? I don't know. I'm sure there are bad actors, but do we as a sector deserve to be looked at with so much suspicion? I'm not sure. So I think there are both sides to the coin. Most regulated, most looked at with suspicion, and some people are put on pedestal. But I don't think neither is deserved.
And I'm one more curiosity. Uh, we spoke about villages being beautiful and simple. Uh, and when you have to go and work with all these sarpanch and officers building the technology, the systems, infrastructure, how is the politics in there? Like, is the microcosm flowing there, or is it
Abs-
simple and innocent?
no, absolutely. It's the same. As in, morally, a village is no different from a city, from an urban area. And, I mean, society at large, whatever vices it carries at the village level as well. So you will have to deal with whatever you deal with in an urban area, in society at large, even in the village, be it like politics, power games, dynamics, ego, corruption.
And how do you navigate that as a woman, Divya? I want this to be as a masterclass for all our women viewers because we face it everywhere all the time.
Okay, classical example, right? So I'm setting up a water center and I consistently have requests that I have to have different color bottles, one for the upper caste and one for the lower caste. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
And I mean, in today's day and age, or they will say, if the people from this caste come here, I'm not going to come here. Or they'll say, you have hired a person from this caste, I'm not going to come and take. And these are things that are a daily occurrence. Or, somebody is saying, you want an electricity connection? I need, I mean, give me some, what they call it, something, goose or something, right? Give me some money, I'll get it done. Or organizations may they'll say, I'll give you this as CSR money. You give a part back to me in cash. These are daily occurrences.
Wow.
Okay. So now, if you need to navigate, see, the thing is, if you don't have an aura of the right values, okay, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
We deal with almost 1,700 government officials across the country. It's like the moment they see that, okay, this is something where somewhere I can push, it is a slippery slope. So you've got to have, from two perspectives, you've got to have your values straight, and like the caste thing, right, is a non-negotiable for me in many ways, right? If I'm not going to ask a woman her caste before hiring her, right? And at the same time, it's also important that I know that it's not only people of one caste that I am hiring across because I just don't pay enough attention. So it's that constant balance of what is being clear about your value and then really applying it in a practical situation in the most pragmatic way.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. Water is a natural resource, and here we are talking about it being colored for
Yeah.
different cars. Oh
It
my
is
God.
water is extremely political.
Mm.
Water is very, very, very political.
What are your top three values?
Oh, personally, I call them the three C's. Okay. Compassion, courage, and curiosity.
Beautiful.
So, yeah. I also have resilience, but I don't know how to fit it in with the C's.
C's. I think
Yeah,
this will lead to the
yeah.
resilience,
Yes. So
isn't
I
it?
say, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the rapid fire round
Okay.
now. Harder to negotiate with a Deloitte partner or a Haryana Gram Panchayat?
Haryana
Gram
Gram
Panchayat.
Panchayat. Any day. Any day, especially in Haryana. Haryana is a very interesting space, right? So it is both, they won't accept a woman as a leader, but they will always respect hierarchy. If I have been placed in that position, they will fall in line. However, if they have to elect,
They will not.
no.
One word to describe the feeling of your first village stay.
Excited.
Shakespeare's play or Volga's feminist literature?
Volga's feminist.
Volga's.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The most common mansplaining you hear about water engineering.
That you solve for the water wars by bringing in newer technology. It is a technological problem and it's not a social problem.
A feminine trait that is actually a massive business asset in rural India.
I think ability to listen deeply, because when you're listening deeply, you understand the consumer, and that really shapes business. Empathy for me is listening deeply without judging.
Tea in a village glass or latte in an urban cafe?
Oh, I love both because I think I have multitudes that way. I have different parts of my personality that are
I
activated
can
by
fit in here and there.
different drinks.
The biggest myth about social entrepreneurship.
That it's easy. I used to have a lot of people that wanted to come and work with us because they just wanted an easier time when compared to their corporate life.
Oh.
But we are forever bootstrapped. We forever don't have money. We forever have to navigate really difficult situations in a very decentralized environment. So I think in many ways it is the resilience, the chutzpah is underestimated many times.
AK-47 or 6 hours of Punjab darkness, which is scarier?
I don't think I can choose between the two. Both were scary, very scary at that time. I was really scared. Actually, I was alone in the 6 hours of darkness. I mean, it wasn't 6 hours of darkness, but so maybe, yeah, the Punjab thing, because otherwise I was in a group with the.
Okay. If you could purify one social toxin in India, what would it be?
Only one.
Okay.
Violence against women.
Absolutely. The legacy you want, water woman or the barrier breaker?
Barrier breaker.
More power to you, Divya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really beautiful to hear your journey, your story, especially the leadership aspect and perspective from you. Thank you for coming and being with us in this podcast and sharing so much of wisdom and insights.
Thank you so much, Sri, for inviting me and for asking very incisive questions. Yeah, and I think I spoke a lot. So I hope it was useful. I hope it'll be useful
Absolutely.
for those that are listening.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.